Hello and welcome to Genius Indian. Friends, today we are going to discuss the concept of the tragedy of the commons. The tragedy of the commons is a situation that occurs in a shared resource system, and it occurs when individual users acting independently according to their own self-interest behave contrary to the common good of all other users. When many individual users begin to act just for their personal interest and don't bother about the common good, they end up depleting or spoiling the shared resource through their collective actions. In short, the tragedy of the commons is the overexploitation of a common resource by some greedy individuals. And loosely, tragedy of the commons runs parallel to the concept of privatizing profits and socializing losses. The theory was formulated by British economist William Foster Lloyd, who, in an essay written way back in 1833, used a hypothetical example of the effects of unregulated grazing on common lands in Great Britain and Ireland. At that time, the common pastures were quite common there, and as it generally happens in such cases, some people took advantage of that situation by quietly grazing more animals than they were supposed to. And such an activity over a period of time caused harm to entire common land, and that's why the theory came to be known as the tragedy of the commons. But it took more than 100 years for the concept to become famous, and it happened when American biologist and philosopher Garrett Hardin wrote about it in 1968. Since then, the world has progressed quite a lot, and today, in our modern world, the term commons is not just limited to some cow pastures, but it means any shared and unregulated resource which is used by lots of people, which belongs to billions of people, and which belongs to humanity as a whole. The most common examples of such resources are rivers, oceans, fish stock, roads and highways, or a village well, or a common dining table in your office, or even a common TV set in your college hostel. For example, a train is a common space for all the travelers, but if a couple of passengers begin to throw garbage on the floor or misuse the doors and windows and seats and toilets, then in that case, the cleanliness and the aesthetic look of entire train will get spoilt for every passenger. Similarly, if one villager draws too much water from a village well, then it reduces the amount of water available to all the remaining villagers. Similar examples also form the backbone of corruption or dirty practices or shady practices. For example, if one employee steals stationery and pens from the common pool of stationery at the office, soon all other employees will begin to suffer. If one government officer begins to use the official car for his family members, then the work of the office will begin to suffer, as other officers will now simply avoid going out. Similarly, the miserable condition of sports in our country is because of the corruption, which is another name for the tragedy of the commons. We all know that a whole lot of sports officials and administrators have been milking the system during past 75 years. And the result is that today we have just one Olympic gold medalist in a population of almost 140 crore people. Similarly, take the example of our forests. They are also a common property, but most often they are overexploited by greedy timber contractors and other vested interests. And as a result, the entire community suffers because of the loss of the forest cover, which results in loss of minor forest produce as well as timber for the rest of the people depending on that forest. Since our environment is common to all the human beings and other living beings, the term tragedy of the commons is suitably applied to all the environmental services, and it is often cited in connection with sustainable development, which tries to mesh economic growth and environmental protection. Situations exemplifying the tragedy of the commons include overfishing and the destruction of rivers and oceans. For example, Ganga is not only a sacred river for millions of Indians, but also the lifeline for almost 50 crore people living along its banks. This simply means that the health and well-being of those 500 million people depends on the condition of this mighty river. If the water quality is good, then those people will enjoy the benefits. But if some polluters pollute the river, then it is the tragedy for the people living downstream. Environmentalists also take the theory a notch further, and they also include other living beings. They say that this entire earth and all its environmental components don't just belong to all the human beings, but also to all other animals, insects, and plant life. And in case we human beings use more common resources, then in that case, animals automatically have to live with less of that resource. For example, because of massive increase in human population today compared to 1,000 years back, we human beings have encroached upon a lot of land which was natural habitat for other animals. And as a result, today we have confined tigers and lions into small sanctuaries, and that's why we often listen stories of lions venturing out into nearby villages or tigers killing the cattle of the villagers living in the vicinity of a particular sanctuary. Since the human beings share a lot of other things apart from the environment, this theory is applicable to a whole lot of other scenarios. For example, email service providers like Google provide this service to everybody. But then some people use it to market their products or services. And as a result, while they benefit from email marketing campaigns, rest of the community of the email users quietly suffers because the spam email degrades the usefulness of the email system and increases the cost for all the users of internet while providing a benefit only to a tiny number of individuals. So friends, this was a brief intro to the concept of tragedy of the commons. In the next episode, we will discuss yet another topic important for our personal and professional growth. So please don't miss it. And the best way not to miss it is to subscribe to Genius Indian channel. And the best way to spread the knowledge is to like and share the video. And the best way to improve the quality of the work is to provide your valuable feedback. And finally, the best way to end this conversation is to thank you for your valuable time. Thanks for watching.